We're going to be preparing tooth number 19 for a full zirconia crown. We're going to use a rounded shoulder margin on this. You can use either a chamfer margin or a rounded shoulder margin for these types of preparations. This preparation you could use with either any kind of zirconia, or you could use lithium disilicate. If you use lithium disilicate, you definitely would want to go to the rounded shoulder margin to give you more bulk of material right down to the margin. With zirconia, it doesn't matter, especially with monolithic zirconia. It's strong enough that it doesn't really make any difference. So this is really kind of a universal preparation. You could use this for about any kind of ceramic that you would use in the posterior, but it's ideally suited for monolithic zirconia. So very first thing, as with any tooth preparation, is check your occlusion. See what your preoperative situation is with the way the teeth come together, and in this particular case with this typodont, there's a good class 1 molar relationship, class 1 canine relationship, where the cusp and fossa from each arch line up nicely with one another, and so there's nothing really strange that way about the preparation in terms of clearance. The anatomy of the tooth preparation will look very similar to the anatomy of the tooth. We're not going to be changing things too much because the cusp-fossa relationship is what it is. So always check that first. We're going to, I guess we'll move that down just a little bit. We're going to start then by, so we've checked our occlusion. We know that the circumstances surrounding that gives us an idea of how we're going to go about the preparation, because you can prepare your occlusal reduction to simply reduction and maintain the anatomy of the tooth, or to clearance. Now, we teach here at the school clearance because that's more practical. That's what you're going to use clinically most of the time is clearance. How clear am I from the opposing tooth structure? And so that's what we're going to focus on today. So the next thing, once we start into the preparation, is to break contact. We'll use I use a 1557 burr for that. It's kind of a disposable burr. You burn through these rather quickly. They're fairly inexpensive compared to your diamond burrs. And so everything we do with the 1557 will be kind of the rough preparation, so to speak. And I would start by breaking contact, just getting the tooth structure away from the adjacent tooth, and we'll do that. We'll start on the mesial aspect. Now, normally in a clinical situation, I'd have my mirror like this, mainly to keep the patient's tongue back and just provide some retraction. So we'll do that. I'm going to turn our suction on here to gather some dust. So we'll start just with brush strokes. Aim the tip of your burr, your carbide. We're going to use a 1557 carbide. And you're going to aim the tip of the burr kind of into that gingival embrasure area. And you don't have to worry about getting up right next to that adjacent tooth. Give yourself a little bit of space, because you're going to go in there later with a larger diamond anyway. And so leave a little bit of tooth structure between you and that adjacent tooth. You can see that little sliver of tooth there. And we're just going to carry that all the way across. As you start to get to the other side, be very careful that you don't, as you break out, it's easy to have the tooth kind of push you into that adjacent tooth as it rolls around the corner. So be holding firmly, take control of it, and just push right on through the lingual. We're going to go to the distal now, and the idea is the same. Whenever I'm breaking contact or I'm interproximal, I like to use direct vision as much as possible. You can't always do it, but if you can, it's helpful, and it allows you to always keep an eye on that adjacent tooth. Just try to avoid scraping it or nicking it. Now, if you do, it's not the end of the world, but you do lose 10 points on a practical, and that's not fun, so try to learn to stay away from it. If you were to do that clinically, scrape up against an adjacent tooth, you get out a sandpaper disc and you smooth it up. So we've broken contact, mesial and distal, and it's now time to do guide cuts. So once we've broken contact, then it's time to go to guide cuts, and this 1557 burr is just really handy for that because it's a millimeter in diameter. I just made a guide cut on that distal lingual cusp, right down the triangular ridge. I'm going to go to the lingual groove now. Let me get my section going. And all these guide cuts do is they just give you kind of an idea so that you can uniformly take the occlusal surface of your tooth down kind of in a geometric way to just a lower level. So remember, our target clearance is 1.5 to 2, and so we just want to go 1 right now. We'll refine it, that last ½ millimeter to a millimeter of additional material that we're taking away. That allows us to do that with our diamond later. So right now we're just trying to maintain the shape of the tooth and drop it down a little bit. So we'll come out here to the functional cut bevel while I've got my handpiece aimed this direction. That's on the buccal groove. We'll now go to the medial buccal cusp. And then the distal buccal cusp. And here's our distal buccal grooves. And then I'm going to flip the handpiece over, and we're going to do the lingual facing incline of the buccal cusp, our functional cusp. And again, your guide cuts, you're primarily doing major grooves and triangular ridges. You can do the marginal ridges up here as well if you want to. It just kind of depends on how much you need. The guide cuts are just a tool to help you reduce the occlusal surface a little bit. I'll probably put another one right back here by this marginal ridge, like that, and maybe even another one right up here on the mesial marginal ridge. So that's basically our guide cuts, and they're approximately a millimeter deep. I don't know whether you can see those or not with that mirror. I can get this larger mirror out, maybe if that helps a little bit. Does that help anybody with anything? Those,
you can get a good view. Yeah,
does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's our guide cuts, and then you go from there right to just connecting your guide cuts. So it's like dot to dot. You're connecting the dots now. You're just going to take off the tooth structure between the guide cuts. Again, this is pretty rough. You're not doing a lot of fine tuning like you will later on with your diamond. that's pretty much it when it comes to connecting your guide cuts. Again, it will look quite rough at this stage. And now it's time to switch from your 1557 carbide to the diamond that you're going to be using. And in this particular preparation, to do a rounded shoulder, you're going to use the 5856 31016 Brasseler. So now I'm going to refine this. I'm going to refine this to that 1.5 to 2 clearance. And so wherever I'm a little bit close, I want to take more. And so if I look right in that, can you see how that area right there is just a little bit tighter than anywhere else? So I'm going to take more structure away right in this spot right there. So this, you start with the functional cusp bevel because it's very accessible. You can get to it. It's right out here where you can see it. And you want to mirror the shape of that opposing tooth. I'll go back to the smaller mirror. And again, I want to get an idea of where I'm close so I can take more away right through there. So let's start our vacuum up. Let's see if I'm in the right spot here. Yep, that is the spot. So we'll take a little more off. And the angle of my burr is the same angle as if I was over here on these lingual cuts. So it's that angle right there. So this angle transferred across. It's just easier for me to hold the handpiece over here so I can see a little better. You may not be able to see as well. Okay, and we're just going to keep going until our red stick will easily fit. So we want the red stick plus a little wiggle room. I wouldn't go clear to the blue. You're going to have your patient do a lot of opening and closing. And now it's probably time to just check with our red stick and see if we can get in there. And you can just stick the end of it right up through there, and that's just about right. I don't have a lot of extra space, but I'm 1.5 and a little bit more. So that's about right. I may take just a little bit more off just to be safe. You don't want to under-reduce these. In the long run, we're trying to conserve tooth structure, and in the long run, if you under-reduce, you're going to cause other problems, and in the long run, be more potential damaging to the tooth if your restoration breaks or the lab has to compromise the contours somehow. So now we've mirrored that quite well. That's pretty much. I'll get my large mirror here so you can see, hopefully. So we've tried to maintain kind of an equidistant measurement or distance, equal distance from the opposing tooth structure. And we've kind of dialed in the functional cusp bevel. So now let's move to the functional cusp. And now, because we know we can fit our instrument in through the functional cusp bevel, we can get at the functional cusp to make sure that we have good clearance. So I'm going to refine that. That's the one I can't see in this light very well. I may have to switch on my headlamp for a minute. We'll see here how much I can accomplish drilling in the dark. I don't recommend that. All right, let's see how we're doing now on clearance here. Now I'm going to take my red stick, and you can bring it in. I'll get this larger mirror out again. You can bring it in. This end is made for coming in from the mesial aspect, and so you turn it sideways now, and you want to get down. I'm trying to get at least to the central groove without resistance, and I'm pretty darn close right there from the mesial. You don't want to force these sticks at all. It's very light touch. You're just having your patient close, and you're just trying to wiggle that through to see if you have enough clearance. Because this red stick is 1.5 millimeters in diameter. I'm going to switch to the other end now and come in from the distal. And I'm already binding a little bit on that distal marginal ridge. Not a lot, but a little. And remember, I want to be, you want to be close to 2, 1.5 to 2. So we're going to take a little bit more off on the distal. Yeah, let's try that now. Get my larger mirror out. And I'm just barely able to get it to that distal marginal ridge. So I can get it through, but I'd like a little more wiggle room with this red measuring stick. So I'm going to take a little more down. I don't need much. And I'm going to take just a little bit more down to be able to fit that through there a little more loosely. So let's come back here. I knew I didn't need much there, and that's probably it. So let's come over to the non-functional cusp, and we'll just carry this on across. I'm using my adjacent tooth structure as a guide, especially near the marginal ridge right there. I'm making sure I drop that down just visually. I want to be down at least 1.5 millimeters from that marginal ridge. And we'll just come up to the mesiolingual cusp. And let's look from the occlusal here to get an idea. And it seems reasonable, so we're going to get that larger mirror so you can see and come in. Now at this point, what I want this stick to be able to do is go clear to the central groove and maybe a little beyond. Now much beyond the central groove, it's guesswork. These sticks are only so useful because you're taking something that has a very regular shape, this round, straight-sided stick, and you're measuring a very irregular shaped object. And so it's not an exact science. This is just one tool that you can use to help determine if you have the clearance you need. So again, patient closes, and you try to get, I can get all the way up over the functional cusp bevel, functional cusp, And as I approach the central groove, I'm starting to get just a little bit of a bind right there. Right in that area. So I still want to take down a little more tooth structure away at the distal. Like I say, you don't want to be under-reduced. You want to give the lab plenty of room to make the indirect restoration. So spend a little time getting your occlusal clearance dialed in. Time to measure again. Let's get the big mirror so you can see. And where we were a little tight was on the distal, so we want to come in, go up and over that distal buccal cusp to the central groove, and then I want to be able to at least start up that lingual, or that buccal facing incline of the lingual groove. And now I'm starting to be able to do that right there. So I get up and over the distal buccal cusp, and I can wiggle it past the central groove. And so we're pretty close on our occlusal reduction, or our occlusal clearance now. So once that's done, it's time to go to your buccal axial reduction. So to do this, you want to line up. There's several landmarks that you can use, but I like to key off of the adjacent unprepared molar and just line my burr up with the long axis of that tooth. Now you can visualize that long axis. It's perpendicular to a line that you might draw across the cusp tips like that. So the long axis would be perpendicular to that. Keep in mind the lower molar is going to be slightly inclined to the lingual, isn't it, because of the curve of Spee. And so your axis, the axis of your preparation, needs to reflect that. If we were on an upper molar, it would be just the opposite. The axis would be slightly to the buccal, again, because of the curve of Spee. So I'm going to line up with number 18, get my burr set, and then just bring it forward and start on the buccal axial reduction of number 19. So again, line up, come forward, and start taking off the tooth structure out on the buccal now. As you're doing your buccal axial reduction, you're going to go into the tooth and gingival kind of at the same time. You want to end up with your margin being 0.5 supragingival. That's ideal. And you want to be a millimeter in axially. Now the end of this diamond is a millimeter in diameter, so it's a good judge, it's a good key for you to use on your axial reduction. So we're staying only on the buccal still. I want to get the buccal dialed in just right. So let's come back and check our axis just like we've been doing. And then we'll come up again and move to the buccal axial wall. Check our axis again. Looks like we're staying on target. I'm going to swing out here a little bit. And still quite super gingival. That's okay, because once you take it away, there's no putting it back. So gradually approach that ideal height from the gum line, kind of including my distal lingual line angle in this as I wrap around, or distal buccal, excuse me. And let's check again on our axis. There we go. Okay, check axis, come forward. Check and see how close we're getting. Still got to come down a little bit toward the gum line. Yeah, we're getting in the ballpark. You want to keep your margins super gingival enough that you can get a nice impression for your project. And I'm still a little bit higher than I'd like to be. A little bit high right there. I'm going to drop that. It's real easy with this rounded shoulder, with this torpedo diamond, to get a J-lip margin. So I'm going to show you in just a second how you can avoid that. Bit. So if you fear you're getting a J-lip, you can dance. Just put the tip of the burr right out on that margin, and on stall out, just carefully dance it along that. So right now, as I look at the profile of that buccal margin, it's almost at a J-lip, so it's almost coming up at the margin. So I'm just going to drop it a small amount with the tip of the diamond, like this. Now it's real easy to have that skip over the edge of your margin, so you've got to be kind of careful when you do that. Now I feel better about where the margin height is out here on the buckle. And I'm going to get the large mirror out so hopefully you can see that. So I've got that gingivally about where we want it, and in terms of axis, it looks like it's lined up with that adjacent tooth, so that axial wall is about where I want it. So once we have the buccal axial wall dialed in, that's our guide for all the other axial walls of this preparation. So you want to spend the time, kind of like you did on your occlusal clearance, get it dialed in, and then move to the buccal axial wall, get that lined up with your axis, and then line up everything off of that buccal wall. Now, interproximally, we're pretty much dictated by the adjacent teeth. We have to miss the adjacent teeth, so we're going to taper it a little bit. It'll probably be over-tapered slightly, but we can't help that. So we extend our axial reduction around through the interproximal toward the lingual now. Now, normally, in a clinical situation, I'd have my mirror again, like this, to kind of keep the patient's tongue out of the way, to retract, and it also helps with illumination a little bit, too. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to take it out, and I can get that some dragging here on me, and we'll go ahead and carry on the buccal axial reduction. We'll start at the mesial, and just take it on through. Thank you. Always kind of keep an eye on that adjacent tooth now when you're in this zone. Check our margin height, and it's about right, so we're going to keep it in that area. A little bit of a concavity on the mesial aspect of this root, so you want to follow that with a little bit of fluting. And then we'll move to the distal axial wall. Same idea. See how super gingival our margin is. That's about right. And we're aiming for a 0.5 millimeter. I'm just blending this line angle so there's a nice transition. So now we're ready to do our lingual axial reduction. And before I start into that, I want you to notice on the planes of reduction with our occlusal reduction, they pretty much mimic the angles on the adjacent teeth. The burr is pretty much lined up just like you know, with these triangular ridges back here on 18, it's brought forward. And the same thing with these inclines back here with your tooth preparation right there. So you can see how you're always paying attention to the surrounding anatomy as you do these preparations. So again, I pointed out earlier that buccal axial wall is now the guide. So if you look down here, you can see there's the axis of 18, and we bring that burr forward and lay it on that buccal axial wall, and it's about right on. That's where we want it. And now to do the lingual axial wall, we simply maintain that angle with a slight taper, and if I can find the rheostat, hit the gas, and start on the lingual axial wall here. So as is the case with all of these aspects of the preparation, we want to frequently check to make sure we're holding it at the right angle. There's a tendency to over-taper these lingual axial walls, and then you lose resistance and retention for them with your preparation. So I'm going to check back here. I'm going to check out here.
Could you bring the mirror forward a little more? Right there.
There we go.
A little bit.
Is that
Right there.
okay? That mirror, I mean, that is right where we'd have that mirror clinically, just to help keep the tongue out of the way. Get this out of the road. So is that a reasonable
right there.
spot there? Okay, so there's our mirror. We're checking axis again. And I'm going to start this lingual axial wall here. Now, as we go to the distal lingual line angle, we want to check to see just kind of which, how the margins are lining up or how they're aiming. I've got a little rough spot on that medial lingual I just noticed. Certainly what you do with your patient clinically is have them, turn to the side to help you out. So there's our angle. We'll bring it over. And we're trying to, once again, go about 1 millimeter deep at the margin, which is the diameter of the tip of this burr. A hard area for all of us to do, that distal lingual line angle. See if that's getting us a little bit closer, and it is. I'm still quite high right there. You can see how it really rises up, and we just don't need that. So that's with high margin. Now they're kind of aiming for each other, so now we just need to blend them. And this is a little bit of looking and a little bit of cutting. And you just continue that until you've refined that connection back there.
Yeah, that's good. It's a nice preparation.
So there we are. I'm a little over-reduced on the lingual axial wall, but other than that, we're okay. So certainly would work clinically, and with that, you're all done.